What happens when a heartfelt conversation about redemption turns into one of the most explosive moments in late-night television history? Tonight, we're breaking down the moment Jelly Roll walked off Jimmy Kimmel's stage after a confrontation that left the audience in complete silence. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think really happened here, because this one is wild. So the interview starts off normal enough. Jimmy's doing his usual thing, cracking jokes, getting the audience warmed up. Jelly Roll comes out, and the crowd goes absolutely crazy. This is a guy who's been on an incredible journey, from his troubled past to becoming one of the biggest names in music right now. The energy in the room is electric. Jimmy starts with the softball questions. They're talking about the new album, the tour, all the usual promotional stuff. Jelly Roll is his typical, authentic self, talking about his music, his fans, how grateful he is for this second chance at life. The audience is eating it up. Everything seems fine. Then Jimmy shifts gears. He brings up Jelly Roll's criminal past, which, to be fair, Jelly Roll has been open about. He's never hidden his history. In fact, it's a huge part of his story and his music. But something about the way Jimmy phrases the question feels different tonight. Jimmy says, "So you spent time in jail, you've talked about selling drugs, getting into fights, all of that, and now you're here, making millions, living the dream. Do you ever feel like you're profiting off of glorifying that lifestyle to kids who look up to you?" You can see Jelly Roll's expression change immediately. The smile fades. He takes a breath, clearly trying to process what was just asked. The audience gets quiet, like they can sense something shifted. Jelly Roll responds, and his voice is measured, but you can hear the edge in it. He says, "Jimmy, with all due respect, I've never glorified anything. I've been honest about my past because hiding it would be dishonest. I talk about the consequences, the pain, the regret. That's not glorification. That's accountability." Jimmy doesn't back down, though. He comes back with, "But you're performing songs about that life. You're on stage talking about those experiences, and young people are buying tickets, buying merchandise with your face on it. At what point does sharing your story become exploitation?" Now the tension is real. You can feel it through the screen. Jelly Roll leans forward, and he says, "Exploitation? Jimmy, I spent years in a cell thinking my life was over. I've lost friends to violence, to overdoses, to a system that chews people up and spits them out. When I talk about that, I'm trying to reach somebody who's in that same dark place and let them know there's a way out. That's not exploitation, that's survival." Jimmy keeps pushing. He says, "But you're making money off it now. You've gone from the streets to sold-out arenas. Don't you think there's something contradictory about building a career on the back of the same life you claim to have left behind?" Jelly Roll's jaw tightens. You can see him trying to stay calm, but it's getting harder. He says, "You know what, Jimmy? I think you're missing the entire point. Yeah, I'm successful now. Yeah, I'm making money. But every single dollar I make represents hours in a recording studio instead of hours on a corner. It represents choosing a microphone over a weapon. If me being successful means that some kid in Nashville or Detroit or wherever sees that change as possible, then yeah, I'm going to make that money, and I'm not going to apologize for it." The audience starts clapping at that, but Jimmy waves them down. He's not done. He says, "I hear what you're saying, but let's be real for a second. You've got a platform now that reaches millions of people, and a lot of those people are young, impressionable. When they hear your music, when they hear your story, what's stopping them from thinking that the path you took is acceptable, that crime and drugs are just stepping stones to success?" That's when Jelly Roll's whole demeanor changes. He sits back in his chair, and there's this moment where he's clearly debating whether to continue this conversation or not. He says, "Is that really what you think I represent? You think I'm out here telling kids to go sell drugs so they can become rappers?" Jimmy shrugs, like he's just asking questions. He says, "I'm just saying, your story has become your brand, and that brand is worth a lot of money. So it's a fair question to ask whether you're really helping people or just helping yourself. Jelly Roll stands up, not in an aggressive way, but in a "this conversation is over" kind of way. He says, "Jimmy, I've sat through a lot of interviews. I've answered a lot of tough questions. I've never once shied away from talking about my past, the good and the ugly. But what you're doing right now, this isn't journalism. This isn't even a conversation. You're trying to paint me as some kind of fraud who's exploiting pain for profit." Jimmy tries to interrupt, saying, "That's not what I said," but Jelly Roll keeps going. He says, "You sit here every night in your comfortable studio, interviewing celebrities, telling jokes, making people laugh. That's great. That's your gift. But don't sit here and question the legitimacy of my redemption when you've never spent a single day living the life I've lived. You've never had to choose between feeding yourself and feeding an addiction. You've never had to rebuild your entire existence from nothing." The audience is dead silent now. This isn't entertainment anymore. This is raw, real emotion. Jimmy's face is serious, and he says, "Jelly, I think you're taking this the wrong way. I'm asking these questions because people want to know. Your fans want to understand how you reconcile your past with your present." Jelly Roll shakes his head. He says, "No, Jimmy, you're not asking for my fans. You're asking because you think you've found some kind of gotcha moment. You think you can corner me into admitting that I'm somehow a hypocrite for being successful after making mistakes. But here's what you don't understand. The reason I'm successful isn't despite my past. It's because I survived it. And the reason people connect with my music isn't because I'm glorifying anything. It's because I'm telling the truth about how hard it is to change." Jimmy shifts in his seat, clearly uncomfortable now. He says, "Okay, I think maybe we should move on to something else." But Jelly Roll's not having it. He says, "Nah, man, we're not moving on. You started this conversation, let's finish it. You want to talk about contradictions? Let's talk about how you sit here every night, making fun of people, politicians, celebrities, whoever. You make your living off commentary and criticism. But the second someone turns that back on you, the second someone questions your intentions, you want to switch topics. That's the real contradiction." Jimmy's getting defensive now. He says, "That's not fair, Jelly. I'm a comedian. Satire and commentary are part of the job. What I do and what you do are completely different." Jelly Roll laughs, but there's no humor in it. He says, "You're right. They are different. Because when I get on stage, I'm being vulnerable. I'm opening up about the worst parts of my life in the hope that it helps somebody. When you get on stage, you're hiding behind jokes. And there's nothing wrong with that, until you decide to weaponize your platform to tear someone else down." The producers are probably losing their minds at this point, because this is not going according to script. Jimmy tries one more time to regain control. He says, "Jelly, I genuinely didn't mean to offend you. These are questions that people have, and I thought we could have an honest discussion about them." Jelly Roll looks at him for a long moment, then says, "Honest? Jimmy, there's nothing honest about what just happened here. You ambushed me with a loaded question designed to make me look like a sellout. And when I defended myself, you acted like I was the one being unreasonable. That's not honesty. That's manipulation." Jimmy's trying to keep his composure, but you can tell he's rattled. He says, "Manipulation? Come on, Jelly. I asked you a question that's on people's minds. If you can't handle tough questions, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews." And that's the moment. That's when you can see something shift in Jelly Roll's eyes. He says, "If I can't handle tough questions? Jimmy, I've sat across from parole boards who held my future in their hands. I've faced judges who wanted to throw away the key. I've looked in the mirror at 3 in the morning wondering if I'd ever be anything more than my worst decisions. So don't tell me I can't handle tough questions. What I can't handle is disrespect disguised as curiosity." The band is awkwardly sitting there. The audience doesn't know whether to applaud or stay quiet. Jimmy's co-host is off to the side, looking like he wants to disappear. This has gone completely off the rails, and everyone knows it. Jimmy tries a different approach. He softens his tone and says, "Look, Jelly, I respect your journey. I really do. But you have to understand that when you put yourself out there the way you have, when you make your past such a central part of your identity as an artist, people are going to question it. That's just part of being in the public eye." Jelly Roll crosses his arms and says, "Question it? Sure, that's fair. But there's a difference between questioning something and attacking someone's character. You didn't ask me how I help people. You didn't ask me about the programs I support, the kids I mentor, the families I talk to after shows who tell me my story saved their son or daughter. You went straight for the throat with this idea that I'm some kind of con artist selling false hope." Jimmy responds, "I never said that. You're putting words in my mouth." Jelly Roll shoots back immediately, "You didn't have to say it directly. It was in the way you asked the question. Do you ever feel like you're profiting off glorifying that lifestyle?" Those were your exact words, Jimmy. You didn't ask if I feel responsible for my platform. You didn't ask how I balance my past with my present. You asked if I'm profiting off glorification, which implies that's what I'm doing. Now Jimmy's getting frustrated. He says, "Okay, maybe I could have phrased it differently, but you're being overly sensitive here. We're just having a conversation." Jelly Roll takes a step closer to Jimmy's desk, and his voice gets quieter, which somehow makes it more intense. He says, "Overly sensitive? Jimmy, do you know what it's like to spend every single day of your life trying to prove you're more than your mistakes? Do you know what it's like to have people constantly waiting for you to slip up, to fail, to prove that you never really changed? That's my reality, every single day. So when someone with your platform suggests that my success is built on glorifying pain and trauma, yeah, I'm gonna be sensitive about it. Because that's not just a question, that's an accusation." Jimmy throws his hands up like he's exasperated. He says, "Jelly, you're taking this way too personally. I'm just doing my job here. I ask questions. Sometimes they're uncomfortable, but that's what makes for good television." That phrase, good television, seems to hit Jelly Roll hard. He lets out this bitter laugh and says, "Good television. There it is. This whole thing isn't about understanding my story or having a meaningful conversation. It's about creating a moment. It's about getting a reaction that you can clip and put online so people talk about your show. I'm not a person to you right now. I'm content." Jimmy looks genuinely taken aback by that. He says, "That's not true, and that's not fair. I interview hundreds of people, and I treat everyone with respect. If you feel disrespected, that's on you, not me." The audience gasps a little at that. It's one of those moments where you can feel the room turn. Even people who might have been on Jimmy's side are now questioning whether he's going too far. Jelly Roll nods slowly, like he's processing what he just heard. He says, "That's on me? So I'm the problem here? Because I didn't just sit here and smile while you question my integrity? That's rich, Jimmy. That's really rich. You know what the saddest part about this is? I came here excited to talk about my music, to connect with your audience, to share my story in a positive way, and you turned it into this." Jimmy's voice gets sharper. He says, "I turned it into this? You're the one who got defensive and made this into a bigger deal than it needed to be? I asked one question, and you exploded." Jelly Roll's face hardens. He says, "I exploded? Jimmy, I've been calm this entire time. What you're seeing isn't an explosion, it's boundaries. It's me refusing to let you paint me as something I'm not. And if that makes you uncomfortable, if that makes for bad television, then maybe you should think about the questions you're asking and why you're asking them." Jimmy leans back in his chair, clearly done trying to smooth this over. He says, "You know what, Jelly? Maybe you're right. Maybe this wasn't the right fit. Maybe we should have just stuck to the pre-approved questions and kept everything safe and boring. But I thought you were someone who could handle a real conversation." Jelly Roll's eyes narrow. He says, "A real conversation requires two people who respect each other. What this is an interrogation. and I don't have to sit here and participate in it. I've done my time being questioned and judged by people who think they have me all figured out. I'm not doing it anymore, especially not for entertainment. Jimmy stands up now too, which is unusual. Normally the host stays seated. He says, "Fine, if you want to leave, leave. But don't expect to come back here and play the victim. You made a choice to share your story publicly, and that comes with scrutiny. If you can't handle that, that's your problem, not mine." The tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Jelly Roll takes his microphone off, carefully, slowly. He sets it down on Jimmy's desk and says, "You're right about one thing. I did make a choice to share my story. And I made that choice because I believe in the power of redemption, in second chances, in the idea that people can change. But you know what I didn't sign up for? I didn't sign up to be talked down to by someone who's never had to fight for anything real in his life." Jimmy's face flushes red. He says, "Excuse me? You don't know anything about my life or what I've been through." Jelly Roll nods and says, "You're absolutely right. I don't. And that's exactly my point. We don't know each other. Not really. You've spent the last 15 minutes making assumptions about me, my motivations, my character, all based on a narrative you've constructed. So maybe before you judge someone else's journey, you should consider that you don't have all the information. None of us do." Jimmy starts to respond, but Jelly Roll holds up a hand and says, "I'm done, Jimmy. This conversation is over. I came here in good faith, and that was clearly a mistake. I hope you got the viral moment you were looking for." The audience is completely silent. Some people look shocked, others look uncomfortable. A few are pulling out their phones to record. This is unprecedented. Guests don't just walk off late-night shows, especially not in the middle of a heated exchange like this. Jimmy calls out, "Jelly, come on, don't do this. We can talk through this like adults." But Jelly Roll is already walking toward the exit. He turns back briefly and says, "Like adults? Jimmy, adults don't ambush people and then act surprised when they defend themselves. Adults don't weaponize their platform to make someone feel small. You want to talk like adults? Start by treating people with basic respect." Jimmy's voice rises, clearly frustrated and maybe a little desperate to salvage the situation. He says, "You're making a huge mistake walking off this stage. You think this makes you look strong? It makes you look thin-skinned and unprofessional." Jelly Roll stops walking. For a second, it looks like he might turn around and come back. But instead, he just shakes his head and says, "You know what's unprofessional, Jimmy? Inviting someone onto your show, building them up in the introduction about their incredible journey and transformation, and then spending the interview trying to tear them down. That's unprofessional. That's also cruel. And I don't participate in cruelty anymore, not even when it's directed at me." Jimmy's not backing down, though. He says, "This is unbelievable. I've interviewed presidents, actors, musicians, activists, all kinds of people, and I've asked hard questions. That's my job. You're the first person who couldn't handle it." Jelly Roll turns fully around now, and his voice is steady but filled with emotion. He says, "Or maybe I'm the first person who had the courage to call you out on it. Maybe everyone else just smiled and played along because that's what you're supposed to do on these shows. Well, I'm not everyone else. I didn't claw my way out of the darkness just to sit here and let someone diminish what that means." The band leader awkwardly tries to start playing some music to transition, but Jimmy waves him off. This isn't over yet, and everyone can feel it. Jimmy says, "So what? You're taking the moral high ground now? You're going to walk out of here and tell everyone I'm the bad guy? Go ahead, but remember, this whole thing is being recorded. People are going to see exactly what happened, and they're going to make their own judgments about who was reasonable and who wasn't." Jelly Roll responds, "Good. I hope they do watch it. I hope they see that I tried to have a civil conversation and you kept pushing. I hope they see that I stood up for myself instead of being a punching bag for your ratings." Jimmy's shaking his head now, clearly frustrated. He says, "Ratings? You think I need to manufacture drama for ratings? My show has been on the air for years. I don't need to create controversy, Jelly. This is all you. You came out here with a chip on your shoulder. Jelly Roll's voice rises for the first time, really rises, and he says, "A chip on my shoulder? I came out here grateful for the opportunity. I was excited to be here. You're the one who decided to turn this into an attack. And now you're trying to rewrite history, acting like I'm the aggressor when all I did was refuse to be disrespected." Jimmy fires back. "You want to talk about disrespect? You just told me I've never fought for anything real in my life. You don't think that's disrespectful? You don't think that crosses a line?" Jelly Roll takes a deep breath, and his voice gets calmer. He says, "You're right. That was a low blow, and I apologize for that. I don't know your struggles, and I shouldn't have minimized them. But Jimmy, can you honestly say that your line of questioning wasn't designed to make me look bad?" There's a pause, a real, genuine pause, where Jimmy seems to actually consider the question. Then Jimmy says, "My intention was to ask questions that I thought viewers would want answered. Whether you see that as hostile or not, that was my intention." Jelly Roll nods slowly and says, "Okay, I can accept that. But intentions don't erase impact. Maybe you thought you were asking fair questions, but the impact was that I felt attacked. I felt like my entire transformation was being reduced to some kind of cash grab, and that hurt, man. For a second, it seems like maybe they've found some common ground." But then Jimmy says, "And I'm sorry you felt that way, but I can't control how you interpret my questions. If your response is to get offended and walk off, that's your choice." And just like that, the moment is gone. Jelly Roll's face hardens. He says, "You're doing it again. Even in your apology, you're putting the blame on me. I'm sorry you felt that way, as if my feelings are somehow invalid. That's not an apology, Jimmy. That's deflection." Jimmy's getting visibly angry now. He says, "What do you want from me, Jelly? You want me to grovel?" I asked a question. "That's it. One question that you didn't like, and now we're in this whole thing." Jelly Roll's voice matches his intensity. He says, "It wasn't one question, Jimmy. It was the question, then the follow-ups, then the implications, then the dismissiveness when I tried to explain myself. You wanted to see if you could get under my skin, and congratulations, you did." Jimmy slams his hand on the desk, which startles everyone. He says, "I'm frustrated that we can't have real conversations anymore without someone claiming they're being victimized. I'm frustrated that asking legitimate questions is now considered an attack, and I'm frustrated that you're standing there acting like some kind of martyr when all I did was my job." Jelly Roll's voice drops to almost a whisper. He says, "Your job is to make people feel small? Your job is to invite someone onto your platform and then question their integrity? Because if that's your job, Jimmy, maybe you need a new job." Jimmy stands up straighter, his face flushed. He says, "My job is to hold people accountable. And if you can't differentiate between accountability and attack, that's a you problem, not a me problem." Jelly Roll lets out a long exhale. He says, "You keep talking about accountability. But who holds you accountable, Jimmy? Who asks you the hard questions? Because from where I'm standing, you're surrounded by people who laugh at your jokes and validate everything you do. So forgive me if I don't take lectures about accountability from someone who's never had to truly answer for anything." Jimmy's jaw clenches. He says, "That is completely unfair. I face criticism all the time. Don't act like I'm in some bubble where I'm never challenged." Jelly Roll responds, "Reading criticism online is not the same as someone looking you in the eye and telling you that you hurt them. And the fact that you can't see the difference tells me everything I need to know." Jimmy's voice is sharp now. He says, "You know what, Jelly? I think we're done here. You clearly came here with your mind made up about me. So go ahead, walk off, make your statement. But don't expect me to chase after you." Jelly Roll picks up his microphone from the desk. For a moment, it looks like he might put it back on. But instead, He just holds it and says, "I'm not expecting anything from you, Jimmy. Not an apology, not understanding, not even basic human decency at this point. What I'm expecting is to walk out of here with my dignity intact." Jimmy spreads his arms wide, theatrical now. He says, "There it is, ladies and gentlemen, the victim narrative. Poor Jelly Roll, attacked by the mean talk show host. This is what passes for courage these days, walking away when things get tough." That stops Jelly Roll cold. He turns back, and his voice is steady and absolutely done. He says, "You want to talk about courage, Jimmy? Courage isn't sitting behind a desk taking shots at people while you're protected by cameras and audiences. Courage is admitting when you've hurt someone. Courage is knowing when to walk away from a toxic situation. So yeah, I'm walking away, not because I'm weak, but because I value myself too much to keep participating in this." Jimmy scoffs and says, "That's convenient. Wrap yourself in self-righteousness and make a dramatic exit. Very rock star of you." Jelly Roll doesn't take the bait. He simply says, "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, Jimmy, because this isn't entertainment. This is just sad. Two people who could have had a meaningful dialogue, instead tearing each other down, and I don't want any part of it." With that, Jelly Roll starts walking toward the exit. Jimmy calls out, "Jelly, you're making a mistake. This is going to follow you." Jelly Roll doesn't even turn around. He just raises one hand in a wave and keeps walking. The audience doesn't know whether to clap or stay silent. Jimmy watches him go, anger crossing his face. He turns to the camera and says, "Well, that just happened. We're going to take a quick break." As Jelly Roll reaches the exit and pushes through the door, he takes off his in-ear monitor and hands it to a stunned production assistant. The door closes behind him, and the studio erupts in confused murmuring. This wasn't just a celebrity walking off a talk show. This was a collision of two worldviews, two definitions of respect. Jelly Roll came to share his story and found himself defending his entire existence. Jimmy came to do his job and found himself accused of exploitation. Neither one was fully right, neither one was fully wrong, but both refused to give an inch. So what do you think? Was Jelly Roll justified in walking off, or did he overreact? Was Jimmy doing his job, or did he cross a line? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure you hit that subscribe button. What's your take on who was in the right here?